Today, we are interviewing Mr. Michael Hendrix, the co-author of Two Beats Ahead, a book about the power of music and creativity in innovation. Mr. Hendrix is both on staff at the Berklee College of Music, where my sister Ranjana is a proud alumnus. We're very proud of her. He's also the global design director for IDEO, one of the most prestigious design consulting firms in the world, and he's also the founder of the Open Music Initiative. This book means a lot to me because I am a former soldier. I am an athlete, and my leadership persona has typically been defined by those two identities. Yet on the side, I've always been a musician. I've always enjoyed rapping, playing guitar, playing piano, enjoying making music with others. And I didn't understand the extent to which that creativity was impacting my own leadership persona. So I'm so excited to talk to Mr. Hendrix here today about his book, Beats Ahead. Mr. Hendrix, Michael, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, Rajiv. I love hearing about your musical background too. That's great.
Oh, well, you know what? My sister, as you would probably know, she went to Berklee. She's the star, right? So I'm just trying to, keep up with her accomplishments.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
Absolutely. Listen, I do want to get to the book, but first and foremost, your list of accomplishments is incredible. I'd love to start off by having you just introduce yourself in your own words.
Well, that's always very hard to talk. I mean, it's hard to talk about yourself, I think, or at least hard for me to talk about myself. But I would say the path I've had for my career has been, part effort, part luck. Probably equal amounts. And the core of it is I've been a designer since I went to college. So I studied in college. I learned on the job. Ended up starting a business once I learned how to do it, how to run a business. Became an entrepreneur once I had more confidence about my business acumen. And then, through that process, learned what I really loved was starting up businesses, not necessarily, running them for 7 or 8 years. So that's what got me to IDEO eventually. Is I love the idea of being able to go to these companies and help them come up with new ventures in the world, new services in the world. That excites me through design.
Brilliant. And so where did this instinct come from? Were you raised in a creative household? I think a lot of folks who maybe later in life look for those creative outlets, we can struggle if we weren't offered them as children. Because for many of us, music is kind of a privilege, So I'm curious, did you grow up in a creative household? Was there a moment in your life where the spark just sort of came alive?
It was a creative household, but not in the way, I think people typically think, and in that it wasn't a house that appreciated the arts, for example, but it was a household that appreciated creativity in the application of daily life. If something breaks in the house, how do you fix it? How do you, it's partly my grandparents came out of the Depression, and they just had the rest of their lives. They never believed in buying anything. They believed in saving everything and then somehow repairing it. And so remember my grandpa would say, he would if he had a problem, he would think about it for a while, go to sleep, and the next morning he would wake up with the answer. And so he was always a problem solver, always tinkering. I think that my mom had that same attribute, and I kind of had it too. And I took art classes in elementary school, like everybody, but I didn't take any in high school. I didn't take any art in high school, and it's funny that I'm a designer as a professional, and music. My parents did love music. My mom played in the church, my dad sang in the choir, and they made me take piano lessons, and I hated it. I just thought it was the worst. It was absolutely the worst. And then when they let me stop, I found out my dad had this guitar that he never played. I don't know where it came from. It was horrible. There's something on a guitar. It's called the action, and the action is the distance between the neck and the strings. And you want, a good guitar is going to have very low action. This guitar had, I swear, it was like an inch action. It was move your whole arm to push down the strings. I developed some very bad playing habits because of that. But I loved it. I loved playing guitar, and so that side of me, like you, it was part of being in bands, playing with friends, and that stuck with me my whole life, even to this day.
You know what? A guitar with that much action, you probably have a very strong left hand. You can
I can
probably,
crush any. I can crush anything. Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome, man. And so it sounds like that kind of came later on, a little bit later on in your childhood, which is super interesting. Just curiosity, you said something. You hated piano lessons, and this is so interesting to me because I think it's a very common instrument for young people to start in when they endeavor into creativity. What is it about piano and piano lessons that you think forces kids to just like hate it?
Well, you only hate it until the regiment comes, right? And you have the teacher that will slap your knuckles if you don't have your proper positioning, and and you have to play songs like that are 50 years old that you don't like. Like it's these things add up pretty quickly, and then um, it's a very like music notation is unlike anything else. I mean, I can't really think of a parallel to it. It's its own thing. So there's three good reasons not to like it, right? I just give you three reasons. Plus lessons. I mean, it's after school, it's the weekend. You want to play, you don't want to go to a lesson. So there's like all kinds of reasons you just don't like it.
Oh, that's so funny. We're going to dive back into childhood creativity a little bit later in the broadcast. But what I want to talk about now is your book. So, you work for this really prestigious consulting company, and you also teach at this really prestigious musical institution. I'd like to understand what you saw in the library of leadership literature that was missing that provoked you to write this book. What were we trying to achieve here?
I think it's very personal for me. I didn't recognize myself in what I read, and I was asking why. Like, why is that? Like, how can I not recognize myself and yet have a successful career, right? So that was the idea bubbling inside. But that was actually a question filled with doubt. Because I didn't recognize myself. I didn't know if I was qualified to be a leader in the way that we expect business people to be. And so I had this incredible doubt. I mean, I did take one of those week-long executive programs at Harvard once, and that was actually great because I think it gave me some foundational knowledge that I didn't have that made me better at what I was already naturally doing.
Yeah.
But eventually, and because I met my co-author Panos, we were both thinking about our entrepreneurial careers. I mean, we both had startups at one point. We recognized that there was something about our musical minds that was being manifested in our professional activity. It was like the perspective that we were bringing. Like we had different value systems than the people around us. We had different interests, and that's eventually what led to the writing of the book, was recognizing that, and then feeling good about ourselves versus questioning whether we should be in the room or not.
That is fascinating. Like, you were looking through, despite having such a successful career, you were reading these, the library of leadership literature that's out there and not seeing yourself. That to me is absolutely fascinating. So when so actually, if you don't mind, we have a couple questions coming in that I'd love to
Yeah.
ask that I think might be kind of interesting. So for similar folks, what advice do you have for people that not might be quote unquote musical, but need to express that creativity? Folks who are, let's say, finding themselves in the more traditional leadership pathways and actually want to go and explore some creative outlets. Do you have any advice for those folks?
Well, one, I'm glad to hear that that's a passion, right? Because if you have that interest or passion, the first thing to recognize is when I'm talking about music, music is one type of creative expression, and we unpack this a bit in the book. But all creativity, in my opinion, if you come back to the mindsets of creativity, starts at a similar core, whether it's design, music, dance, theater, you name it. It's a way of seeing the world. So I would actually start there and ask, what is it about those creative things that are drawing you? Is it because of the perspective? Is it because of maybe a romantic notion about how that was created, how something was created? But try to unpack that first, and then don't worry so much about the outcome of your creativity. That's not the thing to pursue. what's important to pursue is the process itself, because as you become better at that, and you become more, uh, uh, I guess, I don't want to say productive because it's really the wrong word, but the more you create, the more generative you are, the more likely you are to get to the success you're looking for. And that means like get rid of comparison. People say all the time, like, well, I'm not creative because I can't draw. Like, well, okay, those two things, you know, are not necessarily related. you know? So
Yeah,
you want to get,
absolutely.
you kind of want to get back to like, what is it you think about creativity? What's the reality about creativity? And recognize first it's about the way you see the world. And then, you know, pursue the instrument, pursue the drawing, pursue cooking, whatever it is that you want to do.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I think we when in the opening segment of your book, you have this passage that really resonated with me, where it's like, creativity. Well, let's say you have a group of musicians that traditionally would not necessarily be viewed as, these leadership personas in the traditional sense, like a military general or a superstar quarterback athlete, right? But these folks in these pursuits, like you said, it's the process. They have to listen to each other. They have to build upon. It's a yes and sort of environment, even sometimes improvisational. When you go back home and you practice, you have to work on your individual commitment to the team, to the performance. And I'm just curious, in the pursuit of, the arts, if you will, what are some of those, like, table stakes experiences that yield to good leadership down the road in innovation in the private sector? Like, what is it about the day-to-day process of, producing art that yields to better leadership in business?
Well, I mean, one thing you're calling out immediately is it's a discipline, right? I mean, daily process, it is a discipline. So creativity is just like anything else in life. If you're not committed to doing it regularly, it's hard. So think about it like the way you think about exercise or meditation or whatever you do on a regular basis, and recognize that just as you get better in any of those pursuits, you're going to become better creatively by staying committed to that daily activity. That's the process I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Um, the second, I mean, the root of all creativity is being inspired by something, right? It's being open to the world, so that even what we call mundane becomes interesting. And usually that can come by asking questions of why. It can come by just being present and recognizing what's happening in your surroundings. And this is a hard practice because the brain is not wired to do this. The brain is wired to reduce the amount of information around you so that you can focus, right? So, like, for example, I'm looking out the window right now. There's a big dogwood tree. My brain is not trying to count all those leaves. My brain has just said, "Oh, tree," and it's gone on, right? But the complexity of that tree, the way the wind is blowing the leaves right now individually, the raindrops sitting on them, the way the branches moving up and down, there's actually a lot of interesting thing happening with that tree. We tend to tune all of that out, and we're naturally tuning it out. So one thing you have to do is retrain your brain. You want to be noticing these things, and it's not it's a bit like meditation, about being present, being mindful. But you're not noticing it to archive it, to catalog it, to inspect it. You're noticing it to be inspired by it. Like, what else does it make you? It's just the yes and. Like when you're with a person and you're collaborating, Second City, the improv comedy group, they have the yes and mindset, which is you say something, I'm not going to judge it, I'm going to build upon it.
Right.
And I would suggest you actually think about the world in that way too. I mean, we tend to do this all the time too. If we see something that doesn't make sense to us, we might dismiss it, or we might go, "That's dumb. I don't like that," or whatever it is. But again, when you're being present and you're recognizing the things around you as creative fuel, you're more apt to ask questions about it, to notice it, and then you'll express that how in whatever art form you're interested in.
Michael, I think your point is spot on, because when the phrase that your brain is designed to simplify, right, to take this dogwood tree and just turn it into a cohesive message that we can interpret and move on. And what's interesting is, I think it makes sense why that would be the case in sort of a evolutionary survival instinct, right? The faster I can process the simple message and move on to more tasks, I become scalable. But what's interesting in the day-to-day life of the working professional is it's not so much about survival, but it's about notifications, the text messages, the emails, the constant barrage of information, the blog posts, the Twitter stream or whatever. And it forces us to simplify everything into its surface layer interpretation. And as a result, a lot of that creative inspiration, I think, does pass us by. So I really, really appreciate that sentiment. We had a great question come in from Maria. How do you prioritize? Like, let's just take your day-to-day life. You're a busy working professional yourself. How do you prioritize your schedule to find time for a creative outlet? Is it a daily practice? How do you make time for it? What do you do with that designated time? And I guess, how do you judge whether it was a successful day or a failure of a creative outlet day? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I have a couple strategies for that. So one, I would say this changes depending on the season of life, because we all have different constraints in our lives. I tend at this point in my life to be most creative in the mornings. And that's when I'm freshest. So my mind is not weighed down by all the 8 hours beforehand of cognitive load. And so I tend to save things. If I know I need to write, for example, like working on this book, most of this, when I was writing for the book, that was mostly done early in the morning, before the kids are starting school, or right when they leave. It was easy for me. Or on the weekends, I would get up before everybody else in the family and write. I tend to do that though for my professional work too. If I'm writing a proposal for a client, I'll do that in the morning. And if I'm writing to a colleague, I'll do that in the morning. It's because I've just learned for myself, that's when I'm fresh. That's when my brain can activate without being distracted. But that wasn't always the case. It used to be that it was after hours for me. Early in my career, I was much better between, say, 8 p.m. and 1 a.m. Don't know why. It was just a different time in my life. So you kind of sort these things out. The second, though, is that's just daily, and I do tend to stick to that daily. I also take time to go away. So periodically, I'll take a weekend away with a friend. Several times, actually, one of the guys that helped me writing this book, we went to a cabin. We just go to a cabin. I would work on music. He would work on his short stories. And we would do that for 2 days, share what we had made with each other, and go back home and get on with our lives. And I found that periodic stepping away, retreating, just for a short period of time is highly fruitful. So it's just different strategies. But I would recommend you find your strategy. Everybody has a different one. There's a book called Daily Rituals. There's actually 2 books. They're both called Daily Rituals. One is also has a subhead, Women at Work, by a guy named Mason Curry. And it's about novelists, poets, fashion designers that we all admire and what they did every day to be creative. And, most of them have a morning routine or an evening routine. They're working around family obligations. They're working around work obligations, but they were committed to it regularly. And that's the secret.
Super cool. And when you would go on these retreats, by the way, I love this, right? I actually am a big fan. I go on solo backpacking trips for exactly the same thing, right? Like just sort of abstracting yourself from the day-to-day chaos of the world so you can clear your head, find inspiration in the minutia and just the silence of nature. I absolutely love it. But when I go on these, kind of trips, I often don't have a regimen or a schedule. When you went to this cabin, for example, did you have like a distinct number of hours that you would be writing or questions that you would be answering? How did you structure that time so it didn't go to waste?
We don't really say like, hey, let's meet up at dinner tonight and talk about what we've been doing. But it wasn't more structured than that, because you had an intention. An intention was enough. And I mean, the thing about creativity and about calling on it is it's part of it is about making space, right? This is why the retreats are valuable. This is why starting something in the morning is valuable. Your subconscious is probably doing most of the work for most anything in your life, actually. I mean, if you look at the activity of the brain, your conscious thought versus your subconscious is a minority. And a lot of what you need to do is just create room for your subconscious to work. You know, if you're one of those people that has the aha shower moment, you know, that's actually because you've relaxed at some point and your subconscious is doing the work. And then it's like, hey, buddy, you know, and then like throws out the idea to you. And so the retreat strategy is similar. The getting up in the morning strategy is similar. You're making space, you know, and
Making
that's part of the
space
listening.
for your subconscious to work. You're clearing
Exactly.
out that what was it phrase, like you had the superego, the ego, and the id. You're trying kind of clearing out that surface layer of cognition so your subconscious can come to the surface.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I love that. That's beautiful phrasing. Let's get back into some of these anecdotes from the book. One of my favorites, they're anecdotes by, you know, lesser known names, but they're actually a couple big names you had access to, and one of which was the story of Beats by Dr. Dre. And I'm a big fan of Dre. Obviously, for, you know, he's amazing. I'd love to hear. Can you tell our viewers a little bit about this anecdote, how you got inspired by the story, and what you found in his creation of a hardware audio product? It's incredible for a rap star to do that.
Yeah, it's a great example of listening, but maybe not the way you would immediately think, right? So for him, it started very personal, like a lot of these things do. He noticed that his kids were listening to all that hard work from the studio on these tinny little earbuds from Apple. And he was frustrated by it because he knew like the emotional qualities of what he had worked on in the studio were not being translated to the thin dynamics of those earbuds. So Jimmy Iovine, you know, a friend and creative partner at this point, and he and I were talking, and they got the idea. It's like, well, um, why don't we try to reproduce that? I mean, nobody knows what the studio sounds like better than us. We've been producing these albums for a long time, making our own music. And so initially they approached a company. There wasn't any interest in doing this because you know, people look at the market for something like that and they think, oh, it's already saturated. And at the time, if you're looking at it one dimension, you're right. You know, it's the iPod era, right, which turned into the iPhone era, of white earbuds. You know, and Iovine later called them medical equipment because he thought they were just like so sterile, so
That's
uninteresting,
awesome.
and didn't produce great sound. But even Steve Jobs wasn't promoting them. He just said they were kind of thrown in there as a way to get you to use the devices. But he said later on that he always felt that they were, you know, a starter kit. They weren't there to be full time. I think they would argue differently today. I mean, given the ones I'm wearing. But so Ivan and Dre said, okay, we can just go for this. We tried talking to somebody. They were interested. We'll just make it. And they found some partners. They started making these headphones. And what they were trying to do was not reproduce sound authentically, which is, you know, a lot of headphone companies are trying to do that. They wanted to create the emotional experience that they had in the studio itself, because they think that's what's missing in the market. Like no one has made this bass heavy, loud experience that we know all the artists are looking for. And they worked with a lot of different artists. They went, you know, from hip hop artists to like people like Trent Reznor and Nine Inch Nails. Like, you know, do you feel it? Do you feel what you feel? Right. So they're trying to get a broad range. And when they got it, they knew it was right. And then the other thing they knew was that there was a fashion opportunity, right? Because if it was cool to be wearing these white, you know, earbuds, which it was, I mean, there's a point when Apple was just advertising the iPhone based on the earbuds. I don't know if you remember those ads. It was just like silhouettes dancing, and all you could see was the earbuds. So they're like, there's an opportunity here too, because, you know, this has become a fashion statement. So that's where they got the idea, is like, who do we want to start wearing this to kind of stay what we stand for in the fashion. So the NBA made sense. They start with the NBA because that was the ethos they wanted to communicate. So Beats was born like with these two, listening to these two things. The first was listening to the reality that what they felt wasn't reproducible in the market. And the second was listening to reality of there was a style moment, but it was very simple, and you could be a lot more flashy, a lot more fashion forward, and they combine those two things together.
Absolutely. And I mean, even just the marketing strategy, like one of my favorite anecdotes was that like they gave a pair to LeBron James to
Yep,
wear, I believe it was during the Olympic Games, if I'm not mistaken.
that's right.
And
Yeah,
he loved him so much that he bought him for his whole team. And, you know, we all know that for a lot of these athletes, like that pump up playlist, like to get in the zone is so crucial and important. And to do it on just sort of, you know, throwaway earbuds and convert that to like something that's going to elicit that emotional experience was probably, I mean, dare I say it's game changing. Even I like to listen to music when I'm working out, and you know, the better that sound quality, the more it brings out my passion and my emotion. So, I mean, it's a fantastic story. Definitely an anecdote worth a read of the book itself. The second anecdote that really inspired me was the story about Queen Bee, Beyonce. You know, we look at her as this kind of just this iconic artist of multiple generations, but behind the flash and the all the single ladies dance is a businesswoman who is savvy and creative and an amazing delegator and manager and team builder. Like, can you talk to us a little bit about what you discovered?
yeah. What's amazing about Beyonce is, to your point, she has the marquee name, and yet she is probably one of the most collaborative people you'll meet in the industry. It doesn't mean, you know, and when we think about collaboration, her collaboration does nothing to diminish her talent or her reputation. In fact, her collaboration with other people just raises it more, right? And that's amazing. I think a lot of us work in environments where we feel like lots of times when we collaborate, the quality of what we do actually gets watered down, right? There's compromise, there's people not carrying their weight. Um, and the reason she's successful though is because the way she approaches it isn't random. You know, her approach is uh, really about peer respect. Like, I respect you for what you're great at, right? And so my belief is that when you and I work together on something, the result of that will be something we couldn't have anticipated, but it's going to be next level, right? And if you think about that for a second, how we differ that from our work environments, lots of times there's some kind of outcome already defined that needs to be done, you know, and you're going to collaborate with each other to reach that outcome. But that's not the way she's working. I mean, it's not that she doesn't have a vision or a feeling about what it should be, but she's as interested about what's possible from the relationship as she is about that outcome. So for example, when she wrote a song with Jack White, she said, "Jack, I want to be in a band with you." Right? Now, she could have said, "I have this song with this guitar riff, will you play it?" Right? And two different things, right? Um, but often that's what we think about collaboration. It's like, I have this vision, I'm the head, you're the hands, go do that thing, and we collaborated, right? And I, you know, a lot of my early career as an art director was that the creative director says, do this, you do it, you know, and you're done. But as a creative person, as any person, that's really unfulfilling. Like, you don't enjoy being the hands of other people, right?
Yeah.
What you want to do is be a contributor. You have ideas, and so you want to work with somebody that also has ideas, and together you find the new idea that is neither of you, that is something else. That's what Beyonce does, and she's just genius at it.
That's absolutely fantastic. And I think there's absolutely something that every one of us should be taking into our own working professional lives from that story. I mean, inherent in that description, I hear is the word trust. Like, in order for Beyonce, I mean, her cachet is so high. And so when she collaborates sometimes with up and coming artists that may not have her
Yeah,
cachet, she is literally offering part of her brand and her resources, her cachet to that artist, and saying, I trust you to take this responsibility seriously and bring the heat and, you know, get you and dig deep for the creative process. So I mean, what are your thoughts on trust in creativity? Because if collaboration really is so important, and it's something that we find that musicians do uniquely well, like, where does that trust come from? Why? Like, is it just a lack of option? Like, we have to trust each other to get things done? Are there moments in the creative journey that sort of help us understand trust better?
for me, I mean, I believe it comes back to that idea of respect for your craft, for what you can do, right? So, I mean, Beyonce is just not going up to random people that are, marginally good. You're like she would never come to me, a marginally good guitar player, and say, let's work on something, because
Hey, don't sell
she's going
yourself
to
short,
people.
man.
Yeah, she's going to people who are known for their excellence. They have found their creative voice, right? And she's not trying to take their creative voice. She's trying to build on something with them together. So, in the workplace, I think if you want trust, you want to work with people that to be reliable. You want to work with people that are consistently delivering quality work. And if you don't want to be with the person that is known to kind of disappear after the initial call and come back 3 weeks later. You don't want to be the person that says yes and then never delivers. So that's where trust breaks down. So you have to believe in that output, that effective, what I call craft first, and have respect for that for trust to exist.
So what I'm hearing, if I can translate that into kind of a professional context, is that the sort of talent filter is pretty tight. Like for her, when when you choose to work with someone, that she is qualifying. Like, this is someone who's found their creative voice. This is someone who has those kind of fundamental attributes that I'm going to collaborate with. And I think in a professional context, that's like what we kind of call the talent filter, making sure you are hiring the best of the best. You're not just picking up the name because you have an open seat and so forth. So that's really valuable.
Yeah. Another thing I could build on that
Please.
is
yes,
it's
and
also not, it's not it's not about your talent or where you are in the organization. I mean, I think businesses that are the most effective in this way, again, are looking for people who are excellent at something and putting them together, regardless of what their title is, regardless of their department. So cross-functional teams are great. I mean, more companies should be doing them, cutting across departments. But then, seniority probably matters less in that cross-functional team, depending on whatever task needs to be done. Like, so what is that person great at? That's why you want them on the team, not who do they report to or what is their role. And I think that breaks down a lot in corporate culture.
And it's so counterintuitive, isn't it? Because again, like we said at the outset, like, leadership personas are typically rooted in, say, military, athletics, or in corporate America, all three of which have very rigid hierarchies. And I think what you're saying is that, for creative processes to occur, those artificial, manufactured boundaries, if you will, that create this hierarchy, you got to get rid of them. Flatten the chain and just look for people's true talent and passion. And I think that's something, because let's face it, music doesn't come with any organic hierarchy, does it? Right? We're all equal.
It does not. Yeah. I mean, in fact, those roles change all the time. Who leads and who follows changes during the song, right?
Absolutely. Oh, this is I gotta admit, this conversation is making my day. I'm having a blast talking to you about this. I want to get into another aspect of leadership, if you will, which is parenthood. And we touched on it a little bit earlier about the kind of household you were raised in and how you entered into music. So I just became a father of a beautiful baby girl, and my sincere aspiration is that I want her to have creative outlets. But I'm also really scared of that moment where she just gets frustrated and hates the piano and says, forget this, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, what have you learned? I mean, you have 3 kids. Like, what have you learned about creativity in childhood? Like, how can us as new parents, foster a positive relationship with creativity?
With my kids, who are all starting college actually this year, they, what it was, for us, it was always about finding what they were naturally interested in and then feeling that, and it was different because, I mean, in our friend circles, it was just, I saw parents either, they were bringing maybe the blueprint from their childhood to their kids. I did this as a kid, you'll do this as a kid, and that's fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I tried that at different times with my kids, and they resisted it. They didn't want to play sports, for example. I tried so hard. I tried swimming, soccer, we tried ballet. We tried gymnastics, tried a lot of stuff. And what we notice is like they enjoyed any of the experiences, they hated the competition. That was not a motivating factor for
Oh,
them. So we just said, okay, what do they love? They love to write stories, they love to draw, they love to paint, they love to take photographs, explore, write their own songs, and we just leaned into that, and fueled those interests versus trying to map them onto something that other kids were doing.
that's really interesting. And I think you hit on a word that I think is pretty important there, which is the competition aspect. And I think, for
Mm-hmm.
a lot of kids, if you're not coming in with this, like, not every kid is born with this like fierce competitive drive. So even in a musical sense though, can't art also be kind of perceived as competitive sometimes? Oh, if I'm on my own musical journey and I'm playing guitar or piano or something like that, and I see someone who's my age and who's just crushing it and way more advanced and technically competent than I am, like, how do you keep a kid from, saying, hey, I'm not as good. I am that person is superior than me in this art form, and therefore I'm going to start feeling bad about myself. How did you keep their spirits up when they started trying to compare themselves to others?
Well, this is a real challenge, isn't it? Especially if you go to Instagram or TikTok
Oh
for
God.
3 minutes, right? And you see the 1 in 2 million person doing that thing. They're like, "What? I'm not that good,"
Yeah.
But the truth is, every creative person struggles with this, even celebrities. So, Rick Rubin, a famous producer, has said when he's in the studio with an artist, he says if they come in and they say, I want to make the next groundbreaking album. Like I want to do better than the Beatles. I want to do better than Beyonce. He's like, hold on, wait, because he's never seen anybody succeed in doing that. Because the trick is not to try to outdo somebody else, is try to outdo yourself, right? So it's about marking where you are, being real about where you are, and then asking how you can improve, right? One step more, one step more. And athletes do this too, right? Like you look at your time, if you're a runner, you're like, how can I shave 1 second off of that? Would I be happy? And so that's a trick in creativity too. It's competing with yourself, not with others. Now the challenge is all the structures of our society, whether it's entertainment, school, work, they all want you to be competitive with each
Yeah.
other, right? And that's why it's hard. That's why it's hard for a kid who is every message around them is about being the best. Like we're gonna be best, gonna get the gold medal, get the blue ribbon, highest in my class, whatever it is. And we give that feedback. Here's the roster. You're here. You're number 3. You're number 6. Compared to these other people. You think about it. There's like not much in life that's not about comparing yourself to other people or other people comparing you to other people. So you can't let that feed into your creative mind. You have to be confident enough in the process again. And I keep going back to this idea. Confident enough in the process that you recognize the joy of the work is in doing it. The joy of the work is in doing it consistently. The joy in the work is seeing your own growth. If you can believe in that and you can be committed to that, you will get better. You will get better. You will find your voice. You will become somebody unique in that world, and then maybe you will stand out if that is the path you're trying to take. But pursuing those things on their own are just, they're recipes for failure.
I mean, forget just parenthood. That's just good human wisdom, right? Like being able to find joy and fulfillment in just seeing your own personal growth, forgetting the artificial measuring sticks on the outside that are trying to, pit us against each other or measure us against each other. We're all on our own journeys. I think that's a wonderful lesson for just any person to take away. Thank you for that very articulate statement. I'm just, we're coming a little bit closer to the end of time. I have a anonymous question here that I'm going to ask you, and you can feel free to take with it how you want to take with it. This person is asking, to what extent do substances, psychedelics, marijuana, have they impacted the creative journey of the artists you admire? I find that in the music I love, many of them often talk about these substances, and while I don't partake, I would like to understand what is it about these substances that unlocks a creative spirit. So just take that for what it's worth. I hope you don't mind that question, but I thought it's very interesting. I mean, he's not wrong. We often hear that whether it's, Jerry Garcia or even Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre, like they're using substances. And I'm just curious, why is this so prevalent in the creative journey for these artists?
It's a hack, right? It's a hack. I mean, it's a hack to be inspired. It's a hack to see the world from a different angle, to open your mind. Like I was saying, it's a hack to notice things. So yeah, I mean, pick the drug you want to talk about. In any of those cases, you're just trying to see the world from a different angle, and it's something you can do without them. But I mean, some people think it's fun, so they do it. But I guarantee you, like, it's all about that inspiration side. You won't hear any artist talking about any serious artist talking about getting high in the studio when they're writing, when they're actually recording, because it actually makes it harder to do that. I mean, this is a discipline. This is hard work. Creativity is a hard work. So, there's the occasional, again, 1 in 10 million person, you're going to hear their story, like Keith Richards, who seemed to never be sober. But but for the rest of us that are, not in that category, it's about finding your presence and then being committed to your art. And if something works for you in that space, great. But I don't think it's necessary.
That's I think a very important caveat is, like, it's not like they're in studio, in this distorted state, right? They're maybe accessing some creative ideas and potential outside, using it for maybe a spark of inspiration, but they're when they're in the studio, they're still in the moment. They're ready to work. I think it's a really important distinction. So thank you for making that. And I think Rima Dokani actually said, that's an interesting question to understand, kind of like perception versus reality, sort of splitting the two and understanding how the reality of something and the way I perceive it might be two different things. And one might be artistic inspiration, whereas the general reality may not be. Madhu Jumballs asks, would you mind your advice for entrepreneurs to kind of help improve in their personal and professional lives? General advice for entrepreneurs that you've been an entrepreneur yourself. You're mired in the day-to-day activities. You're trying to build product, raise money, sell. You're trying to hire. And you got to abstract yourself. And like you said, pull yourself out of that day-to-day and find some space for the subconscious to come out. For the entrepreneurs out there who are just knee-deep in their life's work, what are some advice that you might have for them?
This will be an interesting one, because I can tell you from my own failures. There's a chapter about producing in the book, and it's one of the people we interview is Hank Shockley, one of the founders of Public Enemy, and he's talking about working with an artist named Slick Rick. Nobody could produce his record. He'd been on the roster of Def Jam for over a year, no record had come out, and he wanted to work with this guy. And he said, I'll give it a try. And what he realized pretty quickly was Slick Rick had a very strong vision for what he wanted. And there, as a producer, there was no point in coming in and saying, hey, you need to do this. So what Hank said is, he said, I came in as imagining I was his assistant. I learned about his strengths. I learned about his weaknesses, and I could fill in where his weaknesses were. As a producer, I could help him be stronger in that way. And the reason I tell that is because as an entrepreneur, as a founder, it is so easy to get into the control mindset. You're managing the whole business, you're building the whole business, you're establishing the culture. It's yours. I did it. I mean, I was involved in everything from our employee manual to our legal contracts to our internal processes to our marketing, all of that stuff. And it's very easy to get into a delusion that you are somehow qualified to be doing all of that stuff.
The delusion. I love it.
So, I mean, you go back to Hank Shockley, you need to surround yourself with people that are qualified, and then recognize how to support them in doing that work. Your job isn't to be the director The idea your job is to be the producer. That's a very different thing. And I didn't know this for a long time. And I mean, in a company like IDEO, where I'm surrounded by, really talented people, my job is not to be telling them what to do. My job is not to be judging their work per se. My job is to create the conditions around them to be the best they can be creatively, right? And so as an entrepreneur, I'll be thinking the same thing. When you think about your team, your job isn't to micromanage them. Your job isn't to direct them. Your job is to create a cultural environment, a business environment in which they thrive. Because when they thrive, your business will thrive.
Absolutely brilliant. I think that is a fantastic leadership anecdote for us to take away. We're coming toward the end of our talk here. I want to give you a little bit of a quick fire because I just over the course of this conversation, I've been uniquely interested in actually your artistic inspiration. So curious if you have a favorite band, favorite song.
Well, I'm Panos and I, my co-author, we joke that he likes extroverted music and I like introverted music.
Eager to hear the distinction.
Well, there's music that you'll play at a party. There's music that you'll play out with your friends, and there's music that you'll just put on headphones and sit on the sofa. And if you try to switch them from those two contexts, they never work, right? You can put on like the drony noise music, which is great for like writing a paper or coding or relaxing. It kills a party immediately. Absolutely kills a party. So yeah, but I'm on that side. So the compromised band would probably be Radiohead. They're just like, they're introverted, but they have a few songs that can cross over into like the public space. So I would call them my favorite.
Awesome, man. How about your favorite book? I mean, this is your first book that you've published. Congratulations, by the way. It's done very well. I'll tell the audience, the way I even heard about this was Amy Cuddy of Harvard, the author of Presence, a very prestigious leadership book, actually promoted it. Her son apparently is at Berkeley, and that was one of the areas of connection. So if it's good enough for Amy Cuddy, it was good enough for me. I'm just curious. So yeah, what in terms of the books you read or are currently reading, what are some of your favorites?
Well, I prefer two kinds of books. Either like Southern Gothic fiction. It's very specific, but Flannery O'Connor is probably my favorite. It's definitely my favorite writer.
All right.
Or I like stories about music, books about music. I love David Byrne's How Music Works, for example, which is as much about the talking heads as it is about the music industry. So anything that kind of reveals behind the scenes and demystifies the creative process. There's another book from the 50s, I think it's out of print, but it's called Conversations with Artists. And that was actually a great inspiration for Two Beats Ahead, because I really appreciated the conversational style with, at the time, these emerging abstract expressionists like Mark Rothko or Jackson Pollock. And I wanted us to have that same kind of feeling in our book, where it felt like you were part of a conversation, joining a reflective moment with somebody versus someone shouting at you, here are the 4 things to do right now.
Yeah. Actually, one of the things I think you accomplished it. In fact, one of my favorite parts about the book is you actually have these interludes between the chapters and major sections where you actually kind of, it's almost like a discography of sorts where you actually like list all the inspirations behind that, that chapter, that segment of the book. So it's a great anthology for everything that was used to inspire the book. So I think you're probably the Conversations with Artists, the next generation's version of that with Two Beats Ahead.
Oh, I would hope so. That'd be amazing.
Absolutely. So listen, Michael, this has been just such a fantastic conversation. We're at the end of our time here. I've learned a lot from you. I've learned about the importance of creating space for our subconscious to actually take the reins once in a while, and accessing that subconscious is really where that creative drive and spark will come from. And accessing it requires space. And quite frankly, it resonates so deeply with me because that's kind of the charter of 99 pages, right? My big thing is I read a book a week. We don't even have a TV in our house. I don't read the newspaper, don't read blog posts, because I think in many ways you're articulating kind of instinctively what I found was that was getting too drawn into like kind of the day-to-day minutia, and I wanted that space. And it's kind of, I think for me, reading is in many ways a source of inspiration. So thank you for putting words to that feeling. I really appreciate that, Michael.
Thanks for sharing that. I love hearing it.
Absolutely. Well, listen, 99 Pages, I want to thank you. I know normally we broadcast on Sundays. Today was a midweek, midday interview, and we actually had quite a few participants in a really active chat. Thank you so much for making time in your busy schedules for us. I think this is an important addition to the leadership repertoire. For any aspiring leader, this needs to be on your list, just to understand the role that creativity has got to play in the future leadership roles that we'll have. Particularly in innovative communities, but honestly, in any role you're going to have. So folks, thanks again for tuning in. We're going to be back in just another few weeks. We'll be promoting new books on leadership, on science, on history. It's going to be a great summer, so stay tuned. Thanks again, and thanks again, Michael, for being with us.
Thank you.